The Taliban commander had a $100,000 bounty on her head, but they didn't even know she was a woman. For 18 months, Gunnery Sergeant Elena Vasquez had been the phantom haunting insurgent operations across Helmand province. Her kill count was classified, but Marines whispered numbers that seemed impossible for anyone, let alone a 5'4" woman from Texas. The enemy called her Shaitan, the devil. Her fellow Marines called her Ghost. But on this sweltering August morning in 2012, as Elena lay in a hide site 1,200 meters from a compound where 12 kidnapped aid workers faced execution at sunset, she faced the most impossible shot of her career. Wind speed, 15 knots, shifting. Temperature, 118 degrees. Target, a terrorist leader surrounded by human shields. One shot, 12 lives. And if she missed, the largest manhunt in Afghanistan would finally have her location. What happened next would make her the most lethal female sniper in Marine Corps history and force her to disappear forever. Welcome to the Silent Service Stories. These are the stories that honor our invisible warriors, the precision marksmen who strike from the shadows and vanish without a trace. Don't forget to subscribe for more veteran stories that reveal the truth about America's most elite fighters. Elena Vasquez learned to shoot before she learned to drive, standing on apple crates behind her grandfather's weathered hands as he taught her to read wind patterns in the mesquite trees of South Texas. At 8 years old, she could put 5 rounds through the same hole at 100 yards. At 12, she was winning junior marksmanship competitions across 3 counties. At 16, she held state records that hadn't been touched in decades. But it wasn't just natural talent that made Elena exceptional. It was the way she saw the world, in calculations, distances, and probabilities that most people never noticed. Mija, her grandfather, Sergeant Major Rafael Vasquez, Reti, would tell her during their dawn hunting trips, shooting is about more than hitting targets. It's about patience, discipline, and understanding that every decision has consequences you can't take back. Rafael had served 3 tours in Vietnam as a Marine sniper, though he rarely spoke about it. Instead, he taught Elena the fundamentals through hunting, how to control her breathing, how to read terrain and weather, how to remain motionless for hours while waiting for the perfect shot. More importantly, he taught her that marksmanship was a sacred responsibility. When you take a life, he said quietly one morning as they watched deer move through the brush, you become accountable for that moment forever. The animal, the circumstances, the decision, it all becomes part of you. That's why we never take shots we're not certain of, and we never kill anything we won't use. Elena absorbed these lessons completely. By high school, she was more comfortable in the woods than in classroom hallways, more confident with a rifle than in social situations that seemed to require skills she'd never learned. While other teenagers focused on parties and dating, Elena spent weekends in hunting blinds, perfecting techniques that would someday save American lives in places she'd never imagined visiting. Her parents wanted her to attend college, maybe become a teacher or nurse like the other smart girls from their small town. Elena had different plans. The day after graduation, she walked into the Marine Corps recruiting office in San Antonio with a high school transcript that showed perfect grades and a shooting resume that impressed even veteran instructors. "Miss Vasquez," Staff Sergeant Martinez told her after reviewing her paperwork, "we don't get many female applicants interested in infantry specialties. Are you sure this is what you want?" Elena met his gaze steadily. "I want to be a Marine sniper." "Well," Martinez said, "let's see if you've got what it takes." 4 months later, Private Elena Vasquez reported to Marine Corps boot camp at Parris Island, South Carolina, carrying skills that would eventually make her one of the deadliest precision marksmen in military history. Marine Corps boot camp is designed to break down civilian teenagers and rebuild them as warriors who will fight and die for each other without hesitation. For most recruits, it's the most challenging experience of their lives. For Elena, it felt like an extended version of the discipline her grandfather had been teaching her since childhood. She excelled in every aspect of training: physical fitness, academic requirements, leadership exercises, and weapons proficiency. But it was on the rifle range that Elena truly distinguished herself. Marine Corps marksmanship training begins with the fundamentals: sight alignment, breathing control, trigger squeeze, and follow-through. Most recruits struggle to achieve basic proficiency with the M16A4 service rifle. Elena shot perfect scores from her first day on the range, demonstrating precision that impressed even the most experienced instructors. "Recruit Vasquez," drill instructor Staff Sergeant Williams told her after she'd posted another perfect score. "Where did you learn to shoot like that? Texas, sir. Well, Texas, we're going to see just how good you really are. The advanced marksmanship challenges that followed would have been difficult for experienced Marines. Elena handled them with calm efficiency that suggested she was operating well within her capabilities. Long-range precision shooting, moving targets, adverse weather conditions, and low-light scenarios, she mastered each challenge while maintaining the focus and discipline that separated professional marksmen from casual shooters. Word of her abilities spread quickly through the training command. Senior instructors began visiting the range to watch Elena shoot, and by graduation, her name was already being mentioned in conversations about advanced sniper training. But first, she had to prove herself as a Marine infantryman. After boot camp, Elena attended the School of Infantry at Camp Pendleton, California, where Marines learn the skills necessary for ground combat operations. The training covers everything from urban warfare techniques to improvised explosive device recognition to small unit tactics. Elena excelled in all areas, but her instructors noticed something unusual about her approach to combat scenarios. While other Marines focused on aggressive tactics and overwhelming firepower, Elena consistently chose solutions that emphasized precision over volume of fire. In urban warfare exercises, she would eliminate key targets with single shots while her teammates engaged in sustained firefights. During patrol scenarios, she demonstrated an uncanny ability to identify threats at ranges that stretched the limits of her equipment. Vasquez thinks like a sniper, one instructor noted in her training evaluation. She sees the battlefield differently than most Marines, not as chaos to be controlled through force, but as a precision environment where careful planning and accurate shooting can achieve objectives with minimal collateral damage. Upon graduation from infantry school, Elena received orders to the 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, where she would serve as a designated marksman with a rifle company deploying to Afghanistan. But before joining her unit, she had one more school to attend, the most challenging and selective training program in the Marine Corps, Scout Sniper School. Marine Corps Scout Sniper School at Quantico, Virginia, has a graduation rate of less than 30%. Students spend 3 months learning skills that transform them from ordinary Marines into precision marksmen capable of operating independently behind enemy lines. The training covers marksmanship, camouflage, stalking, observation, and the psychological preparation necessary for what military manuals diplomatically call precision engagement of enemy personnel. Elena was the only woman in her class of 43 students. She was also the smallest, the youngest, and according to some instructors, the least likely to succeed in a program designed around physical and psychological challenges that had broken thousands of Marines over the decades. Those instructors were wrong. The physical demands of sniper school would have been overwhelming for most people. Students carry equipment loads exceeding 60 pounds while covering distances that can stretch for miles. They crawl through mud, sand, and underbrush for hours while maintaining perfect camouflage discipline. They remain motionless in uncomfortable positions for entire days, observing targets through high-powered optics while recording detailed intelligence reports. Elena's childhood hunting experience had prepared her for all of it. She'd spent countless hours lying motionless in hunting blinds, had learned to move through dense brush without disturbing a single branch, and understood that successful hunting required patience that most people couldn't sustain. But the real test came during stalking exercises, scenarios where students must approach within 200 meters of instructors, armed with binoculars, and years of experience in detecting hidden snipers. Students who are spotted fail the exercise immediately. Multiple failures result in dismissal from the program. Elena never failed a single stalking exercise. Her approach was methodical and conservative, based on techniques her grandfather had taught her for approaching wary deer in dense South Texas brush. She moved slowly, used natural terrain features for concealment, and remained absolutely still whenever she suspected observation. While other students attempted aggressive movements that often resulted in detection, Elena's patient approach consistently allowed her to reach objective points undetected. Vasquez, instructor Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez, told her after a particularly challenging stalking exercise, "I've been teaching this course for 8 years, and I've never seen anyone move through terrain the way you do. Where did you learn that?" "My grandfather, Gunny. He taught me that patient hunters eat and impatient hunters go home empty-handed. Well, your grandfather trained you well. You're going to make a fine sniper. The marksmanship portion of the training confirmed what everyone already suspected. Elena possessed shooting abilities that bordered on supernatural. She consistently achieved precision that exceeded equipment specifications, demonstrated wind-reading skills that impressed seasoned instructors, and maintained accuracy under stress conditions that degraded most students' performance significantly. But more importantly, she showed the psychological makeup necessary for precision warfare. Elena could remain calm under pressure, make life-and-death decisions without hesitation, and maintain focus during extended operations that would exhaust most Marines. Graduation from Scout Sniper School marked the beginning of Elena's transformation from exceptional markswoman to one of the most effective precision marksmen in Marine Corps history. She received orders to join Scout Sniper Platoon, 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines, which was preparing for deployment to Helmand Province, Afghanistan. It was there that Elena Vasquez would earn the call sign Ghost and establish a reputation that would make her both celebrated among American forces and hunted by Taliban leadership throughout southern Afghanistan. Helmand Province in 2011 was the epicenter of Taliban resistance to American forces in Afghanistan. The region's vast opium fields provided funding for insurgent operations, while its rugged terrain offered perfect cover for fighters who had been conducting guerrilla warfare in the same mountains for generations. Forward, operating base. Dwyer sat in the middle of this hostile environment, housing roughly 4,000 American and international forces who conducted daily operations against an enemy that seemed to vanish into the desert whenever conventional forces approached. The base was surrounded by villages where the line between civilian and combatant was often invisible until someone started shooting. Elena arrived at FOB Dwyer as part of a 4-man sniper team led by Staff Sergeant Marcus Thompson, a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan who had spent 6 years perfecting the art of precision warfare. Thompson's team also included Sergeant James Wilson, the spotter whose job was to assist Elena with target identification and environmental calculations, and Hospital Corpsman 2nd Class David Martinez, a Navy medic cross-trained in sniper operations. Vasquez, Thompson told her during their first briefing at FOB Dwyer. I've read your training records and they're impressive, but Afghanistan is different from any range you've ever shot on. The distances are longer, the conditions are harsher, and every shot you take has strategic implications that go far beyond hitting targets. Elena nodded respectfully. What do you need me to know, Staff Sergeant? The Taliban in this province are organized, well-equipped, and smart. They've been fighting foreign armies for decades, and they know how to use terrain to their advantage. Our job is to provide precision engagement capabilities that conventional forces can't match. Long-range interdiction, high-value target elimination, and overwatch for patrol operations. But more importantly, our job is to come home alive. Over the next 18 months, Elena would participate in more than 200 combat operations, ranging from simple overwatch missions to complex direct action raids against high-value targets. Each mission tested skills that had been developed over years of training, but the reality of combat in Afghanistan challenged Elena in ways that no amount of preparation could have anticipated. The distances were indeed longer than anything she'd experienced. Shots routinely exceeded 1,000 meters, with some engagements stretching beyond 1,500 meters. The environmental conditions were brutal. Temperatures that ranged from below freezing at night to over 120 degrees during the day, sandstorms that could reduce visibility to zero, and wind patterns that changed constantly throughout the mountainous terrain. But perhaps most challenging was the psychological pressure of precision warfare in an environment where mistakes had consequences that extended far beyond individual operations. Every shot Elena took was evaluated not just for its immediate tactical results, but for its strategic implications in a counterinsurgency campaign where civilian casualties could undermine years of progress. Elena adapted to these challenges with the same methodical approach that had characterized her training. She studied terrain features until she could navigate in complete darkness, learned to read environmental conditions that affected ballistics calculations, and developed an understanding of enemy tactics that allowed her to anticipate their movements with uncanny accuracy. But most importantly, she never missed. Elena's first combat engagement occurred during her second week in Helmand Province. Her team was providing overwatch for a patrol moving through a village where intelligence suggested the presence of bomb-making materials. The Marines had been moving through the area for nearly an hour when Wilson, her spotter, identified movement on a rooftop 800 meters away. "I've got a male, military age, appears to be armed," Wilson reported quietly into his radio. "He's in position to observe the patrol route." Elena adjusted her scope, reading wind conditions and calculating the ballistic solution for an 800-meter shot in 110-degree heat. Through her optics, she could see the figure clearly. A man with an AK-47 who appeared to be coordinating with other fighters positioned throughout the village. "Ghost, you have clearance to engage," came the voice of the patrol leader over their radio. Elena controlled her breathing, settled her crosshairs, and squeezed the trigger with the smooth precision she'd been practicing since childhood. The shot was perfect, a center mass hit that eliminated the threat instantly while alerting other insurgents that American snipers were in the area. Over the following months, Elena's reputation grew with each successful engagement. Her shots were consistently accurate at ranges that pushed the limits of her equipment, and her ability to remain undetected allowed her team to operate in areas where other units would have been overwhelmed by enemy response. The Taliban began to notice the precision with which their fighters were being eliminated. Unlike the random casualties typically associated with conventional firefights, Elena's targets were selected for their strategic value: bomb makers, weapon smugglers, and local commanders whose elimination disrupted insurgent operations throughout the region. Enemy communications, monitored by American intelligence, began referencing a phantom who struck without warning and vanished without trace. They called her Shaitan, the devil, and placed an increasing bounty on information leading to her capture or death. Elena's fellow Marines had a different name for her: Ghost. She moves through terrain like she's invisible, one Marine told a Stars and Stripes reporter who was writing about sniper operations in Afghanistan. "You'll be watching an area through binoculars, thinking there's no way anyone could approach without being seen, and then Ghost will appear right where she needs to be, take her shot, and disappear again. It's like she's not bound by the same physical laws as the rest of us." The comparison wasn't entirely inaccurate. Elena's movement techniques, developed through years of hunting and refined through Marine Corps training, allowed her to navigate terrain in ways that seemed impossible to observers who hadn't spent similar time learning to read landscape features, wind patterns, and natural concealment opportunities. But Elena's true advantage wasn't supernatural. It was the result of absolute dedication to her craft, combined with skills that had been developing since childhood and judgment that had been sharpened through hundreds of combat operations. By the end of her first deployment, Elena Vasquez had established herself as one of the most effective precision marksmen in Marine Corps history. Her confirmed kill count remained classified, but Marines throughout Helmand Province could point to villages that had been cleared of insurgents, supply routes that had been reopened, and patrol operations that had been successful because Ghost had been watching over them. But Elena's most challenging mission was still ahead of her. August 15, 2012, began like many others during Elena's second deployment to Afghanistan. Intelligence reports indicated increased Taliban activity throughout Helmand Province, with multiple operations planned against American and Afghan forces. What made this day different was a priority message that arrived at FOB Dwyer just before dawn. 12 aid workers from various international organizations had been kidnapped from a medical compound in a village 30 kilometers north of the base. Intelligence sources reported that the hostages were being held in a fortified compound controlled by Mullah Hakim Zadran, a Taliban commander who had been on American target lists for more than 2 years. The tactical situation was complex and dangerous. The compound was positioned on high ground that provided excellent observation of approach routes, making conventional rescue operations extremely difficult. Airstrikes were ruled out due to the presence of hostages and nearby civilian structures. Ground assault would likely result in the execution of all 12 aid workers before American forces could reach them. But intelligence intercepts had revealed something that made immediate action necessary. Zadran planned to execute the hostages at sunset as a propaganda message to international organizations operating in the region. Ghost, Thompson told Elena during the emergency briefing, "We have one option: long-range interdiction of the primary target while he's separated from the hostages. Intelligence suggests there's a window around midday when Zadran conducts security inspections around the compound perimeter. If we can eliminate him during that window, it might create enough confusion for a quick reaction force to extract the hostages." Elena studied satellite photographs of the target area, calculating distances, elevation differences, and environmental factors that would affect a precision shot. The range to the compound was 1,200 meters, at the outer edge of her equipment's effective capability. The terrain provided limited concealment for a hide site, meaning her team would be exposed to detection and counterfire if their position was compromised. Most challenging of all, the shot would have to be taken during the hottest part of the day, when temperature gradients and mirage effects made precision engagement extremely difficult, even for experienced snipers. "Staff Sergeant," Elena said quietly, "it's a difficult shot, but it's possible. I'll need Wilson on spotting duties, and we'll need to be in position before sunrise to avoid detection during movement." "Roger that. We move out in 30 minutes. As Elena prepared her equipment for what would become the most famous sniper engagement in Marine Corps history, she thought about the 12 innocent people whose lives depended on her ability to make a perfect shot under impossible conditions. She thought about her grandfather's lessons about patience and precision, about accepting responsibility for every decision and its consequences. And she thought about the Taliban commander who had made the mistake of threatening the lives of people who had come to Afghanistan to help those who needed medical care. Mullah Hakim Zadran had no idea that Ghost was coming for him. The hide site Elena selected was a depression in the rocky ground 1,200 meters southeast of the target compound, positioned to provide clear sight lines while offering concealment from enemy observation. She and Wilson had moved into position during the pre-dawn darkness, carrying equipment loads that included Elena's M40A5 sniper rifle, Wilson's spotting scope, communications gear, and enough water and ammunition to sustain operations for 12 hours. As the sun rose over the Afghan mountains, Elena began her preparation for what she knew would be the most challenging shot of her career. Through her scope, she could see the compound clearly, a cluster of mud brick buildings surrounded by high walls, with guard positions that commanded excellent fields of fire over the surrounding terrain. The environmental conditions were brutal even by Afghan standards. By 0800 hours, the temperature had already exceeded 110 degrees, and the heat shimmer was beginning to affect visibility through optical equipment. Wind speed was variable, ranging from 5 to 15 knots and shifting direction unpredictably as air currents moved through the mountain valleys. But most challenging of all was the tactical situation. Intelligence reports indicated that Zadran never remained in any single location for more than a few minutes during his security inspections, meaning Elena would have only seconds to acquire target, confirm identification, calculate ballistic solution, and make a precision shot that would determine whether 12 innocent people lived or died. "Ghost, this is Overwatch," Wilson reported through his radio. "I have movement at the compound. Multiple personnel. Appears to be routine morning activities." Elena adjusted her scope, scanning the compound for signs of the daily security inspection that intelligence sources had identified as their engagement opportunity. At 1,200 meters, individual identification required perfect atmospheric conditions and exceptional optical equipment. Elena had both, but she also understood that margin for error was essentially zero. "Overwatch, Ghost. I'm tracking movement on the south wall. Can you confirm identity?" Wilson studied the target through his spotting scope, comparing the figure's height, build, and movement patterns to photographs they'd studied during mission planning. "That's him," Wilson confirmed. "Mullah Hakim Zadran. High confidence. He's moving east along the wall, appears to be conducting inspection with 2 security personnel." Elena settled into her shooting position, controlling her breathing and calculating the complex ballistic solution required for a 1,200-meter shot in extreme heat with variable wind conditions. She had perhaps 30 seconds before Zadran would move to a position where civilian structures blocked clear sight lines. Through her scope, she could see Zadran clearly now, a tall man with a distinctive beard who moved with the confidence of someone who had been fighting foreign armies for decades. He was inspecting defensive positions along the compound's perimeter wall, occasionally pointing toward terrain features while discussing something with his security personnel. Elena read the wind by observing dust patterns and vegetation movement at various distances between her position and the target. The wind was coming from the west at approximately 10 knots, but she could see indicators that suggested it was stronger at mid-range, a classic condition that made precision shooting extremely difficult, even for experienced marksmen. "Range 1,200 meters, she whispered to Wilson. "Wind west at 10, gusting to 15 at mid-range. Temperature 118 degrees. "Confirmed," Wilson responded. "Target is slowing, appears to be examining something on the wall. This might be your best opportunity." Elena adjusted her point of aim to compensate for wind drift and bullet drop, settling her crosshairs on a spot several feet to the left and above Zadran's center mass. The shot would require perfect execution. Any deviation in wind reading, range estimation, or trigger control would result in a miss that would alert the entire compound to their presence while dooming 12 innocent people to execution. She controlled her breathing, relaxed her muscles, and began the smooth trigger squeeze that would send a 175-grain boat-tail hollow-point bullet across nearly 3/4 of a mile of desert air toward a target who had made the mistake of threatening American citizens. The shot broke with the clean precision Elena had been practicing since childhood. Through her scope, she watched Zadran collapse instantly, while his security personnel looked around in confusion, trying to understand what had happened and where the shot had originated. "Target down," Elena reported calmly. "Clean hit, no movement." The chaos that followed provided exactly the opportunity American forces needed. While Taliban fighters at the compound struggled to understand what had happened to their commander, a quick reaction force launched from Fob Dwyer, racing toward the compound in armored vehicles, while attack helicopters provided overhead security. 47 minutes later, all 12 hostages were secure and en route to medical evaluation. None had been harmed during their captivity, and all would eventually return to their families. Elena's single shot had not only eliminated one of the region's most dangerous Taliban commanders, but had saved 12 innocent lives while demonstrating the strategic value of precision marksmanship in complex combat environments. But for Elena, the mission's success was measured not in tactical achievements or strategic victories, but in the simple fact that 12 people who had risked their lives to provide medical care in Afghanistan would live to continue that work. That evening, as intelligence reports confirmed Zadran's death and the disruption of multiple planned Taliban operations, Elena cleaned her rifle with the same methodical care her grandfather had taught her decades earlier in the mesquite brush of South Texas. Elena's elimination of Mullah Hakim Zadran sent shockwaves through Taliban command structure throughout southern Afghanistan. Zadran had been more than just a local commander. He was a key coordinator for insurgent operations across multiple provinces, and his death created a power vacuum that disrupted planned attacks against American and Afghan forces. But his death also made Elena the most wanted American soldier in Afghanistan. Intelligence intercepts revealed that Taliban leadership had increased the bounty on her head to $100,000 and had dispatched specialized hunter-killer teams to locate and eliminate the sniper they knew only as Shaitan. What they didn't know was that their most feared enemy was a 5'4" woman from South Texas who had learned to hunt in terrain not unlike the mountains of Afghanistan. Elena's team was forced to adapt their operations accordingly. Hide sites had to be changed more frequently. Approach and withdrawal routes required more complex planning, and every mission had to account for the possibility that they were walking into carefully prepared ambushes designed specifically to capture or kill Ghost. But Elena had advantages that her hunters didn't fully understand. Her movement techniques, based on skills learned during childhood hunting trips, allowed her to navigate terrain in ways that consistently confounded enemy tracking efforts. Her patience, developed through years of waiting for the perfect shot, enabled her to remain undetected in positions that other snipers would have abandoned after being compromised. Most importantly, Elena understood that successful hunters never became predictable. She varied her techniques, changed her patterns, and approached each mission as if it were the first time she'd operated in the area. Over the following months, Elena continued to conduct precision engagement missions throughout Helmand province, while Taliban forces devoted increasing resources to locating her position. Several close calls, including one engagement where enemy mortar fire landed within 50 meters of her hide site, reminded Elena that her reputation had made her as much a target as the insurgents she was hunting. The psychological pressure was unlike anything she'd experienced during her first deployment. Every mission carried the possibility that Taliban forces had finally determined her location, that she was moving into a trap that would end her career and potentially compromise ongoing operations throughout the region. But Elena's response to this pressure reflected the same mental discipline that had characterized her entire military career. She focused on mission requirements, maintained the technical precision that had made her effective, and trusted the skills that had been developed through years of training and combat experience. By the end of her second deployment, Elena had conducted more than 150 additional combat operations, each one adding to a reputation that had made her both celebrated among American forces and legendary among Taliban fighters who spoke of her in whispers around evening fires. But Elena's most significant challenge wasn't the enemy forces hunting her. It was the realization that her effectiveness had made her too valuable to risk in continued combat operations. Ghost, Colonel Martinez, the Marine Expeditionary Force commander, told her during a meeting at Camp Leatherneck, "Your record speaks for itself, but intelligence reports suggest that Taliban leadership has made your elimination their top priority. "We can't continue to deploy you in standard sniper operations when half of southern Afghanistan is hunting for you." Elena understood the tactical logic behind the colonel's concern, but she also understood that removing her from combat operations would mean abandoning the mission she'd trained for since joining the Marines. "Sir, with respect, this is what I do. The Taliban has been hunting American snipers since this war began. I can handle the pressure." "I'm sure you can, Gunnery Sergeant, but the risk-benefit analysis has changed. Your presence in theater has become a strategic liability that outweighs the tactical advantages of your continued operations." The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, but Elena understood that her combat career was ending. The skills that had made her exceptional had also made her too recognizable, too valuable, and too dangerous to continue operating in an environment where her capture or death could provide Taliban forces with a propaganda victory that might outweigh years of tactical success. 3 weeks later, Elena boarded a transport aircraft at Bagram Airfield for her final flight out of Afghanistan. She was carrying a service record that included 2 Bronze Stars, a Navy Cross, and a classified commendation that would remain secret for decades. But more importantly, she was carrying knowledge that she would spend the next phase of her career teaching to the next generation of Marine snipers. Marine Corps Scout Sniper School had changed significantly since Elena's graduation 8 years earlier, but the fundamental principles remained the same. Transform exceptional Marines into precision marksmen capable of operating independently behind enemy lines. When Elena returned to Quantico as an instructor, she brought combat experience that few people in the world possessed. Her first class included 37 students, including 3 women, a reflection of the military's gradual recognition that precision marksmanship was not determined by gender, but by skills that could be developed through proper training and natural aptitude. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elena told her students during their first day of instruction, "over the next 3 months, we're going to teach you skills that can save American lives and accomplish objectives that conventional forces can't achieve. But first, you need to understand what being a sniper really means." She paused, looking around the classroom at faces that reminded her of her own expression years earlier, eager, confident, and completely unprepared for the realities of precision warfare. Being a sniper isn't about long-range shooting, though that's part of it. It's not about stealth and camouflage, though those are important skills. Being a sniper is about accepting responsibility for decisions that will affect other people's lives, sometimes in ways you won't understand for years. Elena's teaching methods reflected lessons learned during nearly 300 combat operations in Afghanistan. She emphasized patience over aggression, precision over volume of fire, and the psychological preparation necessary for operations that required absolute confidence in your own abilities. But perhaps most importantly, she taught students that successful snipers never stopped learning. Environmental conditions, enemy tactics, and equipment capabilities were constantly evolving, requiring continuous adaptation and improvement. "The fundamentals never change," she would tell students during marksmanship exercises. "Sight alignment, breathing control, trigger squeeze, follow-through. But the application of those fundamentals requires judgment that can only be developed through experience and continuous practice." Elena's reputation as an instructor grew as quickly as her combat reputation had developed in Afghanistan. Students who trained under her guidance consistently demonstrated higher graduation rates and superior performance in subsequent assignments. More importantly, they carried forward an understanding of precision warfare that emphasized responsibility, discipline, and the strategic implications of individual actions. But Elena's most significant contribution to the Marine Corps may have been her work developing training programs that prepared female Marines for combat roles that had previously been closed to women. "Combat effectiveness isn't determined by gender," she would tell critics who questioned whether women could handle the physical and psychological demands of precision warfare. "It's determined by skills, judgment, and the willingness to accept responsibility for your actions. Some of the best snipers I've worked with were women. Some of the worst were men. The difference isn't biology, it's training and character." Elena's advocacy for women in combat roles was based not on political theory, but on combat experience that had proven female Marines could excel in the most demanding military occupational specialties when given proper training and opportunities. Over her 8 years as an instructor at Quantico, Elena trained more than 500 Marine snipers, including dozens of women who would go on to serve with distinction in combat combat operations around the world. Her students carried forward lessons learned during Elena's time in Afghanistan, applying precision warfare techniques in Iraq, Syria, Somalia, and other locations where American forces required capabilities that only highly trained snipers could provide. But Elena's most lasting legacy may be the understanding she helped develop within the Marine Corps that effective snipers could come from any background, any gender, and any demographic, provided they possessed the fundamental characteristics necessary for precision warfare. Today, Master Gunnery Sergeant Elena Vasquez serves as the Senior Enlisted Advisor for Marine Corps Scout Sniper Operations, overseeing training programs that prepare precision marksmen for threats that didn't exist when she began her career. The enemies are different, the technology has evolved, and the tactical challenges have become more complex, but the fundamental principles remain unchanged. Elena's office at Quantico contains few reminders of her combat service in Afghanistan. No photographs of successful missions, no displays of confirmed kills, no awards that reference specific operations. Instead, the walls feature pictures of students who have graduated from sniper school and gone on to serve with distinction in their own assignments. Her desk contains letters from former students describing successful operations, thanking her for training that saved their lives or enabled them to accomplish missions that seemed impossible. These letters, Elena says, mean more to her than any military decoration ever could. "I'm proud of what I accomplished in Afghanistan," she told a group of officer candidates during a recent lecture on precision warfare. "But I'm more proud of the Marines I've trained who have gone on to serve their country with the same dedication and professionalism that the Corps has always demanded from its snipers." Elena's story continues to influence military training programs that prepare both male and female Marines for combat roles requiring exceptional skills and judgment. Her combat record provides evidence that effectiveness in precision warfare is determined by character, training, and natural aptitude rather than demographics or physical characteristics. But perhaps her most important contribution is the example she provides to young Marines who might not otherwise see themselves in roles requiring extraordinary courage and competence. Elena's journey from South Texas rancher's granddaughter to Marine Corps legend demonstrates that exceptional achievements are possible for anyone willing to accept the discipline, training, and responsibility that military service demands. The rifle that Elena carried during her deployments to Afghanistan now sits in the Marine Corps Museum, representing not just her individual achievements, but the contribution of all Marines who have served as precision marksmen in conflicts around the world. The weapon shows wear from hundreds of combat operations, testament to the skilled hands that wielded it in defense of American lives and interests. But Elena's true legacy isn't found in museums or military records. It's found in the training programs she developed, the Marines she mentored, and the understanding she helped create that military effectiveness comes from skills and character rather than assumptions about who can or cannot serve in combat roles. Elena seldom speaks publicly about her combat service in Afghanistan. The details of her operations remain classified. The locations of her hide sites are still marked on maps that few people are authorized to see, and the full extent of her achievements may never be publicly acknowledged. This silence isn't due to modesty or reluctance to discuss her service. It's the result of understanding that precision warfare is most effective when it remains invisible, when enemy forces never fully understand the capabilities that threaten them or the individuals who possess those capabilities. Ghost was an appropriate call sign for Elena, not just because of her ability to move unseen through hostile terrain, but because the most effective snipers operate in shadows, achieving objectives while remaining unknown to the enemy forces they neutralize. Elena's story represents thousands of American service members who have deployed to remote locations around the world, accomplished missions that will never be publicly acknowledged, and returned home to continue serving their country in ways that don't generate headlines or recognition. These quiet professionals form the backbone of American military capability, providing specialized skills that enable conventional forces to achieve objectives that would otherwise be impossible. Their training is extensive, their responsibilities are enormous, and their service often goes unrecognized by the civilians they protect. Elena's grandfather, Sergeant Major Rafael Vasquez, lived to see his granddaughter become one of the most decorated snipers in Marine Corps history, though he never learned the details of her classified operations. When he passed away in 2018, Elena delivered his eulogy to a small gathering of family and friends in the same South Texas community where she had first learned to shoot. "He taught me that marksmanship is about more than hitting targets," she told the mourners. "It's about accepting responsibility for your actions, understanding the consequences of your decisions, and never taking a shot you're not certain of. Those lessons kept me alive in Afghanistan, and they guide everything I teach today." Elena's own story continues to evolve as the military adapts to new threats and new technologies. The skills she developed hunting deer in South Texas and refined in the mountains of Afghanistan are now being applied to prepare Marines for conflicts that may be fought in urban environments, cyberspace, or terrain that hasn't yet been imagined. But the fundamental principles remain unchanged: precision, patience, responsibility, and the understanding that individual actions can have strategic implications that extend far beyond the moment of engagement. The compound where Elena made her impossible 1,200-meter shot is now abandoned, like many locations throughout Afghanistan where American forces once operated. The Taliban have returned to power, the international community has largely withdrawn, and the villages where Elena once conducted precision engagement operations have returned to the ancient rhythms of Afghan life. But the impact of Elena's service extends far beyond the tactical victories she achieved during her deployments. The training programs she developed continue to prepare new generations of Marine snipers. The techniques she refined under combat conditions are now standard operating procedures taught at military schools around the world. And the example she set of a small woman from Texas who became one of the most feared warriors in Afghanistan continues to inspire young Marines who might not otherwise see themselves in combat roles. Elena's story is ultimately about more than marksmanship or military service. It's about the power of preparation, the importance of mentorship, and the understanding that exceptional achievements are possible for anyone willing to accept the discipline and responsibility that excellence requires. In the dusty ranges of Texas, where Elena first learned to shoot, her grandfather's lessons about patience and precision continue to echo. In the classrooms at Quantico, where she now teaches, those same principles are being passed to a new generation of warriors who will carry them to conflicts yet to be fought. And somewhere in Afghanistan, among Taliban fighters who survived Elena's deployments, stories are still told around evening fires about the phantom sniper they called Shaitan, the devil who struck without warning and vanished without trace, reminding them that American warriors possess capabilities they can neither understand nor defeat. Elena Vasquez, Ghost, has become a legend in both armies, remembered by those who fought alongside her as the quiet professional who never missed, and feared by those who fought against her as the invisible enemy they could never find. But Elena herself remains focused on the mission that has defined her entire career, preparing others to serve with the same precision, dedication, and responsibility that her grandfather taught her in the mesquite brush of South Texas. Because the best snipers understand that their greatest victories are measured not in targets eliminated, but in Marines trained, lessons passed forward, and traditions preserved for those who will carry them into whatever conflicts the future may bring. The legend of Ghost continues, carried forward by every student Elena teaches, every technique she develops, and every Marine who learns that precision warfare is about more than shooting accurately. It's about accepting responsibility for the moment when everything depends on making a perfect shot. From South Texas to Afghanistan and back to Quantico, Elena Vasquez has proven that legends aren't born. They're forged through preparation, refined through combat, and preserved through teaching others to reach the same heights of professional excellence. The hunt never ends. It just passes to new hunters who carry forward the same principles, the same dedication, and the same understanding that when lives depend on precision, failure is not an option. What started as a little girl learning to read wind patterns in mesquite trees has become a legacy that will influence military operations for generations to come. Ghost may have returned from the hunt, but her teaching ensures that the next generation of American snipers will be ready when their own time comes to answer the call.